on in the story of Gideon, today we come to probably why the story is so famous, that the army was reduced to 300 and Gideon won a great victory with a tiny army. That's the whole nub of the story. But really one needs to ask the question, why? What was it all about? Because when Gideon first blew his trumpet and began to gather, it looks like there were 32,000. And it was God who said, it's too many for me. It's too many for God. He didn't want that many. He said, lest you become boastful and say we won the battle by our own strength. Now, this surely is what it's all about. That God is jealous to display his own glory. And God is wanting to protect us from thinking that we can be self-sufficient. We can do this thing. That was the big challenge that came to Joshua so early on. Joshua, by faith, walked around Jericho on those 7 days, and then the shout, and then the walls fell, and as a tremendous victory, by faith, they won a victory. That looked impossible. And then very quickly they say, what's the next place? And some go down to look, and it's Ai, much smaller. And Joshua very quickly moves from faith and utter dependence on God to saying, hey, we can handle this. We can do this. It's a small place. We'll send a small army. And of course, God kind of backs off them and they get horribly defeated. God really does want us to be dependent on him. And sometimes that is very dramatically demonstrated in the Bible, such as in the story, reduce it to 300. I wanted to demonstrate that I am sufficient. And to bring it right into New Testament terms, you look at the Apostle Paul, and he goes through such difficulties, such setbacks, such trials, where he says in 2 Corinthians, we despaired even of life. And there's kind of the pressure on him brings up this cry from the depths of his heart, who is sufficient for these things? And then he says, not that we are sufficient of ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God who makes us sufficient. Now that's a tremendous discovery for the believer. First of all, it's a great discovery for some to find they're not sufficient of themselves. Some of us are inclined to think, oh, I could do this. You know, I'd have been successful in business or teaching. I mean, I could have done it. I can do this. Some of us get a rude awakening when we find we can't do it. Some of us are more like Gideon, who knew from the beginning we hadn't got much to offer. Nothing to offer. So we're not so surprised. But the Apostle Paul, that brilliant man, he came to the place when he cried out, oh, who's sufficient? I can't do this on my own. But then quickly came up with this wonderful answer. Our sufficiency is from God who makes us sufficient. God can win a battle with 300. Vastly outnumbered, totally at the mercy, it would seem, of a vast army that was so much greater than them. But if they will walk in faith and obedience, they can win this battle. So it is for you, my friend. You may feel, I'm out of my depth. Who can cope? That's a good place to get to. We won't be boastful. We'll trust in him who raises the dead, who gives us a fresh start, who comes up for us and takes us through again. Although we so many times might say, I'm not sufficient, God says, great, I can bless you. He will bring down the proud, but he will lift up the humble. Be assured of God's wonderful sufficiency on your behalf.